The gaslights of the London ballroom didn't flicker, but the moment Sebastian Thorne, the Duke of Blackwood, stepped onto the floor, the entire room felt darker. They called him the Duke of Ice, a man who hadn't danced in 5 years, a man rumoured to have frozen his own heart to protect his vast empire. So, when Lady Lakota Vance, the daughter of a disgraced baron, dared to offer a shy, desperate smile to the Duke's sworn enemy, the music didn't just fade, it died. What happened next wasn't just a scandal, it was a declaration of war. He didn't just cross the room, he crossed a line that would change their lives forever. This is the story of a smile that started a storm. The year was 1884, and the London season was unforgiving to those without fortune. The air inside the grand ballroom of the Duchess of Holloway's estate smelled of expensive beeswax polish, overly sweet lilies, and the distinct metallic scent of judgment. For Lakota Vance, standing near the velvet-draped periphery of the dance floor, the evening felt less like a social engagement and more like an execution. She adjusted the gloves that she had meticulously mended the night before, praying the dim lighting hid the small stitch on the left thumb. Her dress, a pale lavender silk that had belonged to her mother, was fashionable a decade ago. Now, amidst the bright crimsons and electric blues of the new season's trends, she looked like a faded ghost haunting the living. "Stand straight, Lakota," her father, Baron Thomas Vance, hissed from beside her. His voice was tight, strained by the brandy he'd consumed before they left their crumbling townhouse. "Lord Wyndham is looking this way. Smile." Lakota forced the corners of her lips upward, but her eyes remained wary. Lord Wyndham was 60 years old, possessed a laugh that sounded like wet gravel, and had been widowed 3 times. He was also one of the few men in London willing to overlook the Vance family's destitution in exchange for a young, breeding wife. "Father, please," Lakota whispered, her stomach churning. "Do not make me dance with him again. His hands, they wander. You will dance with the devil himself if it pays the mortgage on the estate," the Baron snapped, though he kept his voice low to avoid a scene. "Do you think I enjoy parading you like this? We are ruined, Lakota, ruined. Unless you secure a match before the season ends, we will be in the workhouse by winter." The brutal truth hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Lakota looked away, her gaze drifting across the glittering crowd. The elite of society swirled in a kaleidoscope of color, oblivious to the girl in the faded dress whose life hung in the balance. It was then that the atmosphere in the room shifted. A hush rippled through the crowd, starting near the grand entrance and spreading outward like a wave of cold water. Even the orchestra seemed to falter for a beat. "He's here," a debutante whispered loudly near Lakota. "I didn't think he'd come." Lakota followed the collective gaze of the room to the top of the marble staircase. Standing there, looking down at the frivolity with an expression of utter boredom, was Sebastian Thorne, the Duke of Blackwood. He was a man composed of sharp angles and shadows. Tall, with broad shoulders that strained against the black superfine wool of his tailcoat, he looked less like a nobleman and more like a predator surveying a herd. His hair was dark as pitch, and his eyes, even from this distance, pierced through the haze of the ballroom. They were grey, the colour of a winter sea before a storm. Rumours clung to Sebastian like smoke. They said he had destroyed 3 rival families financially, just for looking at him wrong. They said he had exiled his own brother. They said he possessed a heart of stone, incapable of affection, focused only on the accumulation of power. He was the wealthiest man in England and the most terrified. "Look at him," Lakota's father muttered, a mix of envy and fear in his voice. "Blackwood. If he looked twice at you, our troubles would vanish. But a man like that doesn't buy damaged goods." The insult stung, but Lakota was used to it. She watched as the Duke descended the stairs. The crowd parted instinctively, creating a wide berth around him. He didn't acknowledge anyone. He simply walked toward the far side of the room, near the balcony doors, and took a glass of champagne from a trembling footman. He turned his back on the room, staring out at the night, making it clear he wished to be anywhere else. "Ignore him," her father commanded. "Focus on Wyndham. Or better yet, look there." Lakota turned her head. Walking toward them, cutting a very different figure, was Julian Sterling, the Earl of Westbourne. If Sebastian Thorne was the night, Julian Sterling was the golden hour. He had honey-colored hair, a ready smile, and a charm that seemed to ooze from his pores. He was handsome, in a way that made young ladies giggle behind their fans. But Lakota knew the history. Everyone did. Julian Sterling and Sebastian Thorne hated each other with a biblical intensity. Their feud was over land, over politics, and over a woman who had died years ago. Julian's eyes locked onto Lakota. He didn't look at her with the predatory hunger of Lord Wyndham, nor the cold indifference of the Duke. He looked at her with kindness, or perhaps pity. "Lady Lakota," Julian said, bowing smoothly as he reached them. "You look like a violet in a field of weeds." Lakota felt a flush rise to her cheeks. "Lord Westbourne, you are too kind." "Not kind, merely honest," Julian said, turning his charm on her father. "Baron Vance, surely you won't monopolize your lovely daughter all evening? The waltz is beginning." Her father practically drooled. An earl was better than a wealthy widower. "She is all yours, Lord Westbourne, all yours." As Julian led her onto the floor, Lakota felt a strange sensation. She felt watched. She glanced towards the balcony doors. Sebastian Thorne had turned around. Across the expanse of the crowded ballroom, those grey, storm-filled eyes were fixed directly on her. Or rather, they were fixed on the hand Julian had placed on her waist. Sebastian didn't move. He didn't blink. He just watched, his face a mask of terrifying stillness. "Don't mind him," Julian whispered, pulling Lakota closer than was strictly proper. "The Duke enjoys playing the gargoyle. He hates seeing anything beautiful in the hands of another." Lakota looked up at Julian. "Is it true that you and he are enemies?" Julian laughed, a soft, melodic sound. "Enemies implies he is my equal. Thorne is a brute, Lakota. He destroys everything he touches. That is why I had to rescue you." "Rescue me?" "I saw the way you looked tonight," Julian murmured, his voice dipping low, intimate. "Sad. Lonely. A woman like you deserves to be smiled at." And that was the mistake. It was the trap she didn't see. Overwhelmed by the first kind words she had heard in months, relieved to be away from the lecherous gaze of Lord Wyndham, and charmed by the Golden Earl, Lakota let her guard down. She looked into Julian's eyes, and for a fleeting second she forgot the poverty, the debt, and the pressure. She smiled. It was a genuine, radiant smile that transformed her face, lighting up her eyes. She smiled at Julian Sterling, the rival of the Duke of Blackwood. The moment that smile broke across her face, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. From the corner of her eye she saw movement, violent, sudden movement. Sebastian Thorne had pushed off the wall. He handed his glass to a passing duke without looking, the crystal shattering in his grip. But he didn't stop. He began to walk. He didn't walk around the edge of the floor. He didn't wait for the song to end. He walked straight through the middle of the waltzing couples. Dancers stumbled and parted like the Red Sea before him. His strides were long, eating up the distance, his coat billowing behind him like the wings of a crow. His face was a thundercloud. His jaw was set so hard a muscle feathered beneath his ear. "Oh dear," Julian whispered, seeing him coming. A flicker of triumph crossed Julian's face, a look that Lakota missed in her confusion. "Here comes the beast." The music wavered as the musicians realized something was happening. The violins screeched to a halt. The cellist stopped mid-bow. Silence crashed down on the room, heavy and suffocating. Sebastian Thorne did not stop until he was mere inches from them. He loomed over Julian, broader, darker, and infinitely more dangerous. But he didn't look at his rival. He looked down at Lakota. His eyes were burning with an intensity that made her knees weak. It wasn't hatred. It was something far more volatile. "Thorn," Julian said, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "We were in the middle of a dance. Surely you remember how those work." Sebastian ignored him entirely. He reached out, his large, gloved hand snatching Lakota's hand from Julian's shoulder. His grip was firm, bordering on painful, possessive, and electric. He yanked her away from the Earl, pulling her so close that the buttons of his waistcoat pressed against her chest. The gasp from the crowd was audible. This was a breach of etiquette, so severe it could ruin a reputation. Sebastian leaned down, his face inches from hers. Lakota could smell sandalwood, tobacco, and the sharp scent of winter air clinging to him. "You do not smile at him," Sebastian growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her bones, loud enough for the nearby couples to hear. "Not him. Never him." "Your Grace," Lakota squeaked, terrified and breathless. I was only—" Sebastian didn't let her finish. He turned his glare to the orchestra conductor, who was trembling on his podium. "Play," Sebastian commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order given by a man who owned the world. "A waltz, now!" The conductor frantically tapped his baton, and the music started, frantic and uneven at first before finding its rhythm. Sebastian looked back at Lakota, his thumb brushing the pulse point on her wrist, which was hammering like a trapped bird. "No more," he said, his voice rougher now, tinged with a desperation she couldn't understand. "Dance with me." Lakota had no choice. One did not refuse a duke, especially not one who looked ready to burn the building down with his bare hands. Sebastian didn't wait for her to curtsy or accept. He swept her into the dance with a force that took her breath away. He danced as he walked, with power and precision. He moved her across the floor with an expertise that betrayed the rumors of his rusty social skills. He was leading her, but it felt more like he was shielding her, his body acting as a barrier between her and the rest of the world. The other dancers had retreated to the edges of the floor, turning the waltz into a spectacle. They were the only two moving in the center of the vast ballroom. Hundreds of eyes bored into them. The whispers rose like the buzzing of wasps. "Did you see how he grabbed her?" "The Vance girl. Why her? He's mad. The Duke has finally gone mad." Lakota could hear them, and shame burned her cheeks. "Your Grace," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Everyone is staring. Please, you are making a scene." "Let them stare," Sebastian murmured, his gaze locked on hers. He refused to look away, forcing her to meet his intensity. "Let them talk. I care nothing for the whisperings of sheep." "But I do," Lakota hissed, a flash of spirit breaking through her fear. "I have to live in this society, Your Grace. You can retreat to your fortress, but I have to survive here. You are ruining me." Sebastian's hand tightened slightly on her waist. For a second, a flicker of something like pain crossed his stoic features. "Ruining you? Is that what you think I am doing? You pulled me from the arms of an earl to drag me around the floor like a rag doll," Lakota retorted. "My father will be furious. Lord Westbourne is a snake," Sebastian cut her off, his voice dropping to a glacial chill. "If you knew what he does to women who smile at him, Lakota, you would run into the Thames before you let him touch you again." Lakota faltered. The use of her given name, spoken with such rough familiarity, sent a shiver down her spine. "And you are the protector," she challenged, though her voice lacked conviction. "The man they call the Duke of Ice?" Sebastian spun her, the movement sharp and dizzying. "Ice burns, Lady Lakota. Never forget that." They danced in silence for a moment, the tension between them thick enough to cut. Lakota became acutely aware of the heat of his body. Despite the ice moniker, he was scorching hot. His hand on her lower back felt like a brand. She realized with a start that he was trembling, a microscopic tremor in his hands. He wasn't angry. He was restraining himself. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why me? We have never spoken." I am nobody. Just a bankrupt baron's daughter in a faded dress." Sebastian stopped. The music was still playing, but he simply stopped moving in the center of the room. He looked down at her, his eyes searching her face, taking in the frayed lace of her gloves, the worry lines around her eyes, and the defiant tilt of her chin. "You are not nobody," he said, his voice low and hoarse. "I have watched you, Lakota. I have watched you enter these ballrooms for 3 years. I have watched you hold your head high while they sneer at your dress. I have watched you mend your own gloves in the shadows." Lakota's mouth fell open. He had been watching her? The most powerful man in England had noticed her invisibility. "And tonight," Sebastian continued, his voice hardening, "I watched you smile at the one man who would use that light to destroy you just to spite me. I could not watch that. I would not." Before Lakota could process this confession, the music ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Sebastian stepped back, but he didn't release her hand. He turned to face the crowd, his expression shifting from intimate intensity back to the terrifying mask of the Duke of Blackwood. He scanned the room, his gaze daring anyone to speak. He saw Julian Sterling standing near the punch bowl, a smirk playing on his lips, holding a glass raised in a mock toast. Sebastian's jaw tightened. "Come," Sebastian said to Lakota. "Come? Come where?" "Away from here. I am taking you home." "You can't," Lakota gasped. "To leave with a man unchaperoned? It would be social suicide. Your father is already in my carriage," Sebastian lied smoothly, though Lakota suspected he had simply ordered his footman to abduct the Baron. "And as for society—" He raised his voice so it carried to the nearby matriarchs. "If anyone has a question regarding Lady Lakota's honor, they may bring their inquiries to Blackwood House. I shall be waiting with my seconds." It was a challenge. He was effectively placing her under his protection, declaring that an insult to her was a duel with him. He tugged her hand, leading her off the floor. The crowd parted even faster this time. Lakota felt like she was in a dream, or a nightmare. She was being dragged out of the ball by the most feared man in London, leaving behind a scandal that would be printed in every paper by morning. As they reached the grand doors, Sebastian paused. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear, sending a jolt of electricity through her. "Do not smile at him again, Lakota," he whispered, a possessive edge to his voice that frightened and thrilled her in equal measure. "Because next time, I won't just dance, I will kill him." He swept her out into the cool London night, where a black carriage with the ducal crest waited. The door opened, and indeed, her father was inside, looking pale and clutching a bag of gold coins that hadn't been there before. "Get in," Sebastian ordered. Lakota climbed in, her heart pounding against her ribs like a hammer. She looked back at the Duke as he climbed in after her, the gaslight illuminating the sharp planes of his face. She realized then that her life as a wallflower was over. She had just stepped into the center of a fire, and she had no idea if she would burn or be forged into something new. The carriage lurched forward, rattling over the cobblestones, carrying her away from the ballroom and into the dark, unknown world of Sebastian Thorne. The carriage interior was upholstered in dark velvet, muffling the sounds of the London streets outside, but it could not dampen the suffocating tension inside. Baron Vance sat huddled in the corner, clutching the bag of coins Sebastian had tossed at him as if it were a holy relic. Lakota sat opposite him, her hands folded tightly in her lap to hide their shaking. Sebastian sat beside her, too close. His heat radiated through the layers of her silk dress, a constant reminder of the formidable force she was now tethered to. "Father," Lakota said, her voice cutting through the silence like cracked glass, "what is in that bag?" The Baron looked up, his eyes watery and shifting. He didn't look at her. He looked at Sebastian. "It is salvation, Lakota. It is a fresh start." "It is £30,000, Sebastian stated calmly, staring straight ahead. the exact sum of your father's gambling debts to the various clubs in St. James, including the 5,000 he owed to Lord Wyndham. Lakota felt the blood drain from her face. She turned to her father, horror dawning on her. You owed Wyndham money? Is that why you forced me to dance with him? Were you selling me? The Baron flinched. I had no choice. He held my notes. He said he would forgive the interest if I encouraged you to be amenable to his suit. Amenable, Lakota whispered, the word tasting like bile. He is 3 times my age. He is cruel. And he is nothing compared to the debt your father was about to incur tonight, Sebastian interrupted, his voice dropping an octave. He finally turned his head to look at the Baron, his grey eyes filled with a disgust so potent it made the older man shrink back. Tell her, Vance. Tell her what you were discussing with Lord Westbourne while she was smiling at him. I don't know what you mean, the Baron stammered. Don't lie to me, Sebastian growled. I have ears everywhere. Westbourne offered to buy your mortgage. He offered to clear your accounts in exchange for Lakota's companionship for the season. Not marriage, Vance. Companionship. Lakota gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Companionship was a polite word for a mistress. Julian Sterling, the Golden Earl with the kind eyes, had been negotiating to make her his kept woman while she gazed at him with naive hope. He said he would take care of her, the Baron whimpered. We are destitute, Lakota. What was I to do? We have no coal for the winter. The servants haven't been paid in 6 months. So you sold me? Lakota's voice broke. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and angry. To the highest bidder? First Wyndham, then Westbourne? And now me, Sebastian said. The carriage lurched as it turned a corner. Lakota turned slowly to face the Duke. And what did you buy, Your Grace? Did you buy my companionship too? Is that why we are here? Sebastian looked at her. For the first time, the hardness in his face softened, replaced by a complex expression of frustration and something else. Possessiveness. I bought your freedom, Lakota, he said firmly. I paid your father's debts. Every farthing. He owes nothing to Wyndham, nothing to Westbourne, and nothing to the gaming hells. And what do I owe you? She asked, her chin lifting defiantly despite her fear. Men like you do not give away fortunes for charity. No, Sebastian agreed. We do not. I do not want you as a mistress, Lakota. That is beneath you, and it is beneath me. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded document. I want you as my wife. The Baron dropped the bag of coins. It hit the floor with a heavy thud. Wife? He squeaked. The Duchess of Blackwood? Lakota stared at him. You want to marry me? Why? You don't know me. You barely spoke to me until an hour ago. I told you, Sebastian said, his eyes darkening. I have watched you. I know you're loyal. I know you're strong. And I know that if I leave you with this man, he gestured vaguely at her father, Westbourne will find a way to claw his way back in. He will destroy you to hurt me. He will ruin you just to see if I bleed. He leaned forward, trapping her with his gaze. Marry me, Lakota. I will restore your family's estate. I will give your father a monthly allowance that will keep him comfortable, in the country, far away from London's gaming tables. You will never be cold or hungry or afraid again. You will be the most powerful woman in England. And the price? Lakota whispered. What is the price? You will never smile at Julian Sterling again, Sebastian said, his voice lethal. You will never speak to him. You will be mine. Completely. It wasn't a proposal of love. It was a transaction, a fortress built around her to keep his enemy out. But as Lakota looked at her father, a man who had tried to sell her twice in one night, she realized she had no other shield. I have conditions, Lakota said, her voice trembling but clear. Sebastian raised an eyebrow, surprised. Conditions? I will not be a prisoner. I will be a wife. I will have the run of your home. I will have my own money. And I will not be kept in the dark about why you hate him so much. Sebastian stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. Agreed. Then, Lakota said, taking a deep breath that felt like inhaling ice water, I accept. The wedding took place 3 days later by special license. It was a stark, joyless affair held in the private chapel of Blackwood House. There were no guests, only the Baron, who looked eager to leave with his allowance, and the priest. Lakota wore a dress of cream silk that Sebastian had ordered for her, tailored to perfection in record time. It was beautiful, far more expensive than anything she had ever owned, but it felt like a costume. When the priest pronounced them man and wife, Sebastian didn't kiss her. He simply pressed his lips to her forehead. His skin was burning hot, a stark contrast to the cold stone of the chapel. It is done, he murmured against her skin. You are safe now. But safety, Lakota quickly learned, felt remarkably like isolation. Blackwood House was a beast of a building. It sat on the edge of London, surrounded by high iron gates and sprawling, overgrown gardens that seemed to swallow the sunlight. The interiors were grand but oppressive, endless corridors of dark mahogany, heavy tapestries depicting hunting scenes, and silence. A silence so deep it rang in her ears. The servants moved like ghosts. They were efficient, polite, and terrified of their master. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, was a woman made of starch and vinegar who looked at Lakota with a mixture of suspicion and pity. The Duke values his privacy, Your Grace, Mrs. Gable said on Lakota's first morning, as she gave a tour of the estate. The West Wing is his domain. You are not to disturb him there, unless invited. Is that where he works? Lakota asked, touching the dust-free surface of a marble bust. That is where he keeps his past, Mrs. Gable said cryptically, tightening her lips. The master has many burdens. It is best not to add to them. For the first week, Lakota barely saw her husband. They dined together at the end of a table long enough to seat 30 people. Sebastian was polite, inquiring about her day, ensuring she had everything she needed. But he was distant. He would watch her eat with that same intense, brooding gaze he had used in the ballroom. But he offered no conversation, no warmth. He left early every morning for Parliament or his business clubs and returned late, smelling of cigar smoke and rain. He slept in a separate room adjoining hers. Every night, Lakota would hear him pacing the floorboards, back and forth, like a caged tiger. The loneliness began to gnaw at her. She had traded poverty for luxury, but she was just as alone. One rainy Tuesday, a week after the wedding, the monotony was broken. Lakota was in the morning room, trying to read a book, when the butler, a kindly old man named Higgins, entered with a silver tray. He looked pale. Your Grace, Higgins said, his voice wobbling. A package has arrived for you. For me, Lakota perked up. From whom? There was no card, my lady. Just this. He set a large rectangular box on the table. It was wrapped in lavender paper, the exact shade of the dress she had worn the night of the ball. Lakota's heart skipped a beat. She untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in white tissue paper, was a pair of exquisite white kid gloves. They were the finest quality, soft as butter. But it was what lay beneath them that made her blood run cold. It was a small dried violet, and a note, for the violet in the field of weeds. A pity such beauty is now planted in such rocky, barren soil. Do not wither, my dear. The sun is waiting. There was no signature, but she knew. Julian. Take it away, she whispered, stepping back as if the box contained a viper. Take what away? The voice came from the doorway. Thunderous and deep. Sebastian stood there. He had returned early. He was dripping wet, his coat soaked from the rain, and he was looking at the box on the table. He crossed the room in 3 strides. He looked at the gloves, he looked at the violet. He read the note. The transformation was terrifying. The Duke of Ice shattered. A roar of pure, unadulterated rage ripped from his throat. He grabbed the box and hurled it into the fireplace. The paper caught fire instantly, the flames licking up the expensive leather of the gloves. He dares, Sebastian snarled, his hands curling into fists at his sides. "He dares to send this filth into my house!" "Sebastian," Lakota said, reaching out to touch his arm. "I didn't ask for it, I swear." He whipped around to face her. His eyes were wild, the pupils blown wide. He grabbed her shoulders, not to hurt her, but to hold her in place. "I know you didn't. That is his game, Lakota. He wants you to think he is the savior. He wants you to think I am the monster." "Then tell me," Lakota cried, pushing back against his chest. "Tell me why. Why does he hate you? Why do you hate him? I am your wife, Sebastian. Stop treating me like a porcelain doll and tell me the truth." The air crackled between them. Sebastian looked down at her, his breathing heavy. The fire crackled behind him, consuming Julian's gift. "You want the truth?" Sebastian asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Come with me." He grabbed her hand, dragging her out of the morning room. He didn't lead her to the library or the parlor. He led her to the forbidden West Wing. They passed startled servants, marching down the corridor until they reached a heavy oak door at the very end. Sebastian unlocked it with a key he kept on a chain around his neck. He pushed the door open. "Look." Lakota stepped inside. It was a nursery. It was preserved perfectly in time. A rocking horse in the corner, a crib draped in lace. But everything was covered in a thin layer of dust. And on the wall, there was a large portrait. It depicted a young woman, strikingly beautiful, with dark hair and laughing eyes. She was sitting in a garden, holding a baby. Standing behind her, looking younger and infinitely happier, was Sebastian, and standing next to him, with a hand on Sebastian's shoulder, smiling that same charming, golden smile, was Julian Sterling. "Her name was Isabel," Sebastian said, his voice void of all emotion, which was more terrifying than his anger. "She was my wife, and that," he pointed to the baby, "was our son, William." Lakota stared at the painting. "You were friends? You and Julian?" "We were brothers in everything but blood," Sebastian said. "I loved him. I trusted him. And because of that trust, my wife and son are dead." The air in the nursery was stale, preserved like a tomb. But as Sebastian began to speak, the room filled with the ghosts of the past. "It was 5 years ago," Sebastian began, his voice devoid of the rage he had shown earlier, replaced by a hollow, aching emptiness. He walked over to the rocking horse, running a large finger along its painted mane. "Julian and I were inseparable. We were the golden boys of London. I was the serious one, the planner. Julian was the life, the spark. When I married Isabel, Julian was my best man. When William was born, Julian was his godfather." Lakota watched him, her heart twisting. It was impossible to reconcile the Duke of Ice with this man who spoke of friendship with such reverence. "So what happened?" she asked softly. "Pride," Sebastian whispered, "and a wager." He turned to face Lakota, his grey eyes swimming with a memory he wished he could scrub from his mind. It was midwinter. The roads were treacherous, sheets of ice under fresh snow. I had to travel north to the coal mines to settle a strike. Isabel stayed behind at our country estate. Julian was visiting, Sebastian's hand clenched into a fist at his side. Julian had purchased a new phaeton, a racing carriage, high perch, incredibly fast, and dangerous on anything but dry ground. He wanted to show it off. He bragged that he could make the run from my estate to the village in under 20 minutes. Naira. Lakota felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty room. "No." "Isabel tried to stop him," Sebastian continued, his voice cracking. "The servants told me later. She begged him not to take the horses out. But Julian, he had a way of making caution sound like cowardice. He taunted her. He asked if she had become as boring as her husband. He challenged her to come with him, to feel the wind, to live a little." Sebastian closed his eyes. She went. She took William. She thought if she went, she could make him drive slower. She thought she could supervise him. They never reached the village, Lakota whispered, tears streaming down her face. He took the Devil's Bend at a full gallop, Sebastian said, the words coming out like jagged stones. The carriage skidded. It flipped. It rolled down the embankment into the freezing river below. The silence in the room was absolute. "And Julian?" Lakota asked, dreading the answer. "Julian jumped," Sebastian said, his voice dropping to a hiss. As the carriage went over the edge, he jumped clear. He landed in the snow with a broken arm. My wife and my son were trapped inside the cabin as it sank under the ice. Lakota covered her mouth to stifle a sob. The horror of it, the betrayal, was beyond comprehension. "He didn't dive in," Sebastian said, shaking his head slowly. "He didn't try to save them. He walked back to the estate. He told the staff there had been an accident. By the time they got there with ropes and horses, it was too late. They were gone." He looked at Lakota, his expression shattering. "I came home to coffins. And do you know what Julian said to me at the funeral? He stood over their graves, his arm in a sling, and he said, 'If you hadn't gone to the mines, Sebastian, you could have driven them yourself. It's a pity you chose money over your family.'" "He blamed you?" Lakota gasped, fury igniting in her chest. "He rewrote the story," Sebastian said. "To the world, it was a tragic accident. To society, Julian is the grieving friend who barely survived. But I know the truth. He killed them with his vanity, and he saved himself with his cowardice." Sebastian turned away, leaning heavily against the wall, his broad shoulders shaking. "That is why I cannot bear to see you smile at him, Lakota. That smile, it is the same smile Isabel used to give him. Innocent, trusting, he feeds on that light. He consumes it until there is nothing left but darkness." Without thinking, Lakota crossed the room. She didn't care about propriety or the boundaries he had set. She reached out and took his hand. It was cold, trembling. "I am not Isabel," she said fiercely, squeezing his fingers. "And you are not the man you were 5 years ago. You are stronger. You survived the ice." Sebastian looked down at their joined hands, then up at her face. The mask was gone. He looked lost. "I am terrified," he confessed, a whisper so low she had to lean in to hear it. "I thought if I locked myself away, if I became a monster, I could never be hurt again. But then I saw you. And now, I am terrified he will take you too." "He won't," Lakota vowed. She reached up, her other hand cupping his jaw. His stubble was rough against her palm. "He will never have my smile again. You have my word, Sebastian. I am your wife. I am on your side." For a moment, time suspended. The distance between them vanished. Sebastian leaned into a touch, his eyes closing as if he were soaking up the warmth of the sun after a long winter. He didn't kiss her. It was too soon. The wounds were too raw. But he pressed his cheek against her palm, a gesture of surrender that was far more intimate. "Stay with me," he breathed. "Help me keep the ghosts at bay." "I'm not going anywhere," Lakota promised. And in that dusty nursery, amidst the wreckage of the past, the marriage of convenience ended, and a partnership forged in fire began. 2 weeks later, the Duke of Ice did the unthinkable. He accepted an invitation. It was the opening night of the Royal Opera, the pinnacle of the social season. Every box would be full, every eye watching. For 5 years, the Blackwood box had remained empty, a black tooth in the glittering smile of the theatre. But tonight, Sebastian had decided it was time to stop hiding. "Are you sure about this?" Lakota asked as her maid fastened the diamond necklace around her throat, a family heirloom Sebastian had retrieved from the vault. It was heavy, cold, and undeniably magnificent. Sebastian stood in the doorway of her dressing room. He looked devastating in formal evening wear, the white tie stark against the black coat, his dark hair brushed back. But his eyes were alert, scanning the room as if looking for threats. "We cannot live in the shadows forever," Sebastian said, walking over to her. He placed his hands on her shoulders, looking at their reflection in the vanity mirror. "If we hide, he wins. He thinks I am broken. Tonight, we show him I am not." He looked at her reflection with a possessiveness that made Lakota's breath hitch. She wore a gown of deep midnight blue velvet meant to match the Blackwood colours. She looked every inch a duchess. "You look formidable," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching in a rare half-smile. "I am terrified," she admitted. "Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Stay close to me." The arrival at the opera house was a gauntlet. As their carriage pulled up, the crowd fell silent. When Sebastian stepped out and offered his hand to Lakota, the flash of cameras and the murmur of the crowd was like a physical wave. They walked up the grand staircase, heads high, Sebastian's hand firm on the small of her back. They took their seats in the private box. The theatre was a cavern of red velvet and gold leaf. From their vantage point, they could see the entire aristocracy of London. And the aristocracy was staring back. Across the theatre, in the box directly opposite theirs, sat Julian Sterling. He was surrounded by laughing women and sycophantic men. He looked like a sun king holding court. When he saw Sebastian, his laughter stopped. He raised his opera glasses, staring brazenly at Lakota. Sebastian stiffened beside her. "Don't look at him." "I'm not," Lakota lied, gripping her fan until her knuckles turned white. The lights dimmed, and the overture of Tosca began. The music was tragic and soaring, mirroring the tension in the box. Halfway through the second act, Sebastian leaned over. "I must speak with the Minister of Trade during the intermission. He is in the box next door. Will you be all right for 5 minutes?" "I will be fine," Lakota said. "Go." Sebastian hesitated, touched her hand briefly, and slipped out into the corridor. Lakota sat alone in the semi-darkness, the music washing over her. She felt exposed without Sebastian's looming presence. The curtain to the box rustled. "Back so soon, Sebastian?" she asked, not turning around. "Not quite." The voice was smooth, like warm honey laced with arsenic. Lakota froze. She spun around. Julian Sterling was standing inside her box. He had slipped past the guards, or perhaps he had bribed them. He looked dashing, his golden hair catching the dim light, but his eyes were cold and dead. "Lord Westbourne," Lakota said, her voice icy, "you are not welcome here. Leave before my husband returns." "Your husband?" Julian sneered, stepping closer. "The monster who bought you. Tell me, Lakota, does he hurt you? Does he lock you in that dungeon of a house and force you to mend his socks?" "He treats me with honor," Lakota retorted, standing up to face him. She was trembling, but she refused to show it. "Which is more than you ever intended to do. I know about the bet, Julian. I know about the companionship you offered my father." Julian's face darkened. The charm evaporated. "He told you that? Did he also tell you that he killed his first wife? That he drove her to her death with his coldness?" "Isabel was miserable, Lakota. She begged me to take her away that night. I was trying to save her from him." "Liar," Lakota spat. "He told me about the carriage, about the ice, about how you jumped." Julian laughed, a low, ugly sound. "And you believe him? The man who has been a recluse for 5 years? He is mad, my dear. Everyone knows it. He imagines things. He creates villains to justify his own failures." He took another step, invading her personal space. He smelled of brandy and expensive cologne. "You are in danger, Lakota. He will snap one day. He will hurt you just like he hurt her. But I can help you. I can get you out." He reached out, his hand grasping her upper arm. His fingers dug into her flesh through the velvet. "Let go of me!" Lakota cried, trying to pull away. "Don't be a fool," Julian hissed. "I am trying to save you. Come with me now. We can leave during the intermission. I have a carriage waiting. I would rather die than go anywhere with you," Lakota shouted, raising her hand and slapping him across the face. The sound of the slap was swallowed by a crescendo from the orchestra, but the impact was clear. Julian recoiled, his hand flying to his cheek. His eyes flashed with pure violence. "You ungrateful little—" The curtain was ripped back. Sebastian stood there. He took in the scene instantly. Julian in his box, Lakota flushed and breathing hard, Julian's hand raised as if to strike her. The beast broke free. Sebastian didn't speak. He didn't challenge Julian to a duel. He launched himself across the small space. He tackled Julian, driving him back against the railing of the box. The audience below gasped as the two men crashed against the velvet barrier. Sebastian had his hands around Julian's throat, his face a mask of murderous rage. "I told you!" Sebastian roared, his voice booming over the music. "I told you never to touch what is mine!" "Sebastian, stop!" Lakota screamed, grabbing his arm. "You'll kill him! Everyone is watching!" The music stopped. The actors on stage froze. The entire opera house turned to watch the Duke of Blackwood strangling the Earl of Westbourne in the royal box. Julian, his face turning purple, clawed at Sebastian's hands. But even as he choked, he looked at the crowd below, and then at Sebastian. And he smiled. It was a twisted, victorious smile. Sebastian saw it. He realized, a second too late, that this was the trap. Julian wanted this. He wanted the world to see the mad Duke losing control. He wanted witnesses to the violence. Sebastian released his grip, stepping back, his chest heaving. Julian slumped to the floor, coughing and gasping for air, playing the victim perfectly. He tried to kill me," Julian rasped, loud enough for the boxes nearby to hear. "I only came to pay my respects, and he attacked me." "You liar!" Lakota shouted, stepping between them. "He assaulted me! He broke into our box!" But the whispers had already started. The crowd couldn't hear the details. They only saw the violence. They saw the Duke of Ice living up to his dark reputation. Julian stood up, straightening his cravat with shaking hands. He looked at Sebastian with eyes full of malice. "You are insane, Thorn," Julian said calmly, "and I will not let you keep an innocent woman trapped in your madness. I will petition the crown. I will have you committed." He looked at Lakota, his voice dripping with faux concern. "Don't worry, my dear. I will come back for you." Julian turned and exited the box, leaving Sebastian and Lakota standing in the wreckage of their social standing. Sebastian stood frozen, his hands still trembling from the adrenaline. He looked at Lakota, his eyes wide with panic. I played right into it. He goaded me. He wants to have me declared incompetent so he can take control of the Blackwood estate. He wants more than the estate, Lakota realized, a cold dread settling in her stomach. He wants to destroy you by taking me. He wants to win the game he started 5 years ago. Sebastian turned to her, desperation in his eyes. "We have to leave. Now, before the police arrive." "No," Lakota said, her voice finding a steel she didn't know she possessed. She grabbed Sebastian's hand, pulling him to the front of the box, into the full view of the staring crowd. "What are you doing?" Sebastian hissed. "We are not running," Lakota said, lifting her chin. "If we run, we look guilty. Stand tall, Sebastian. Look at them." She squeezed his hand so hard her nails dug into his skin. "Let them look. Let them see that I am standing with you, not behind you. With you." She stared down the hundreds of judging eyes, her gaze daring them to challenge her. She was no longer the wallflower in the faded dress. She was the Duchess of Blackwood, and she had just declared war on the darling of London society. But as the curtain fell on the act, a footman entered the box, looking pale. "Your Grace," he stammered, holding out a silver platter. "A letter. For the Duchess. From the Earl of Westbourne's solicitor." Lakota took the letter. Her hands shook as she opened it. Sebastian watched her read it. "What is it?" Lakota looked up, her face white as a sheet. "It's not a petition for your sanity, Sebastian." "Then what?" "It's a debt bond," she whispered, the paper fluttering in her hand. "Apparently my father didn't just borrow money from the gaming hells. He borrowed against a dowry he didn't have." She looked at her husband, tears filling her eyes. "Julian bought the bond this morning. Technically. Legally. My father signed a contract promising my hand in marriage to the holder of this note if the debt wasn't paid by midnight tonight." Sebastian snatched the paper. "I paid his debts. Not this one," Lakota said. "This is a private contract. It predates our marriage license by 2 days. Julian is claiming our marriage is invalid because I was already contractually promised to him." The trap hadn't just been sprung. It had snapped shut around their necks. Julian didn't just want to ruin them socially. He was using the law to annul their marriage and claim Lakota as his property. The debt bond was a death sentence for their marriage. Julian claimed Lakota was legally his, citing a contract signed by her father a week before the wedding. But Lakota spotted the flaw. Her father had been bedridden with gout that week. The document was a forgery, signed only hours ago under duress. To prove it, they needed the only witness, her father. They tracked him to the Blind Beggar, a notorious Whitechapel gin seller. Julian's hired thugs blocked the way, sneering at the aristocrats. But they underestimated Sebastian. The Duke of Ice unleashed a fury that had been bottled up for 5 years, dismantling the guards with brutal efficiency to drag the weeping, drunken Baron out of the shadows. The hearing the next morning was a battlefield. Julian sat with a smug grin, confident his money had bought the law. But Lakota stood tall. She produced the note Julian had sent her after her wedding. Mocking her as a violet in rocky soil, she turned to the judge, her voice ringing clear. If he believed I was his betrothed, why did he acknowledge my marriage to the Duke in his own handwriting? He only claimed me when he realized he couldn't control me. The contradiction shattered Julian's case. Under the weight of Sebastian's terrifying glare, the Baron finally broke. He confessed that Julian had bribed him to backdate the signature the previous night, to annul the marriage. The judge's gavel fell like thunder, dismissing the claim and ordering an investigation into the Earl. Julian was not just defeated, he was exposed. Sebastian took the floor, finally breaking his silence on the tragedy of 5 years ago. He revealed to the court that Julian had not survived the accident, but had caused it, abandoning Sebastian's first wife to die in the frozen river to save his own skin. "A coward's silence breaks when the sun comes out," Sebastian declared, holding Lakota's hand. Stripped of his lies and his reputation, the Golden Earl fled the court, a ruined man, leaving the Duke and Duchess to walk out into the sunlight, victorious. 6 months later, the Blackwood estate was no longer a fortress of silence, but a home filled with music and light. At the winter ball, the crowd parted not in fear, but in awe. Sebastian Thorne, the man who had once frozen his heart to survive, swept Lakota onto the dance floor. "Let them watch," he whispered, his eyes warm and full of devotion. "I want them to see exactly who I belong to." They had walked through the fire of scandal and the ice of grief to find each other. The wallflower had bloomed into a queen, and the beast had finally found his heart. What an incredible journey. Lakota went from a pawn sold by her father to a duchess who took down a corrupt earl. She proved that dignity and truth are stronger than any scheme. She saved Sebastian from his past, and together they showed that true power isn't about fear. It's about standing by the one you love when the world turns against you. Call to action. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please give this video a huge thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a daily dose of drama and romance. And tell me in the comments, did you forgive the father in the end? Or was he just as bad as Julian? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.